thanks a lot for joining us. Daniel and I have been doing this podcast, I think since like 2015, like maybe 9 years. Daniel, is that right?
About that, yeah, yeah, a long time. So we've interviewed a bunch of founders, a lot of Y Combinator
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, a
Tracy
lot of Stanford
Young.
professors.
Yeah, Tracy Young, right, Daniel?
Yep. So she had a massive exit. Really good, like Stanford professors and whatnot have been on. But I met
Cool.
Greg. He was trying to actually partner up with my previous company, and that's how we kind of like started talking. And he was running a podcast, and I was like, hey, that would be great if we like join forces and do a podcast together. I guess a little background on Vibhu and like what he like has done, Greg, so you just have some background. But I met him. He was running a company called Origami Labs way back when, and this is like really old school Y Combinator. Probably like I would say less than 60 companies per batch, give or
We're
take.
63. Yeah.
63. Okay. Okay. It's close. It was a different world back then. And I feel like Vibhu has been in like Silicon Valley ever since, working with amazing people, honestly, on all bleeding edge technology. I followed you for years, Vibhu, like just out of respect. I always thought you were like a true like entrepreneur through and through. I guess we could kind of let you talk about your like story a little bit and like who you
Okay.
are and like how you got to where you're at. Because like I would say primarily our audience is like entrepreneurs and founders. So like you have a
Okay.
lot of experience, years of experience. So maybe we could start from like before Origami Labs. Like,
Yeah. I gotta I gotta find all the memories somewhere somewhere deep inside. But they're all there, all the pain, all the suffering.
yeah, yeah. Like on your LinkedIn, I'm actually looking at it right now. Like Roblox, I didn't even know you were there. And Roblox is massive. That's like
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
probably like a top 10 game for kids. So
Top three. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's like a complete world in itself. But you were there like early on, that probably like left an impression on you. And then you were at MySpace, like
Sure.
that probably left an impression on you. Like most people, like first of all, are not in Silicon Valley. Like, were you here originally, or did you move here?
I came to the Valley right after I graduated. So now I'm originally from Philly, but I kind of weird, but I knew from really young what I wanted to do exactly in my life, and that was to write code and to build companies, like probably from like age 10 or 11. And so my plan in college pretty much was to move out and do the thing. Probably like you too. Like a lot of my inspiration came from Jessica Livingston's book, Founders at Work. And I think I don't know how I acquired that book, but that was the experience I was chasing, and I continued to chase, I guess, to this day.
Interesting. So I didn't know it was that book. So you read that book like, I guess early on you were like looking to be an entrepreneur, looking to code, but like I guess you were like fumbling through different startup books because back then there wasn't much content. As weird as it sounds, like I think today it's so much easier to like
Yeah.
build a startup. Like back then it was kind of a black box, right?
When I was a kid, I would go to my local library, different library, public library,
Yeah.
and I would go to the nonfiction section, and I would pick up biographies of Bill Gates, the founder of like the guy that created Xbox. I can't remember his name, like Steve Jobs. So I had like definitely I don't know, I'm not exactly sure why, but that's what I like to read, and that was what I became interested in. There was a documentary film as well called Startup.com, which covered a really early Silicon Valley tech startup in the kind of like government tech space. And that company ended up not working, but I still like that like collection of like content was like my anchor. And even in college, I used to listen to like the only thing there's early podcasts back in the day, like This Week in Startups, no, This
Yeah.
Week in Tech, and a couple other ones like that. So I don't know, it just it was kind of there. That was the rabbit hole of the internet that I found myself in, and content, and very foundational for me for sure. What was it for you? Did you read those, any of those books I mentioned?
For me, it was more situational where 2008 happened and I was left without a job. And like the housing crisis was happening. Like they were letting people go. The banking system was like, where we might fail. Everything was falling apart. And I just remember thinking like, I need to take control of my own destiny because if the system like can't figure it out, it's not gonna like protect me. And it was more of like a instinctual visceral reaction to like honestly the market. And I was like, I need to figure out how to survive in this cold hard world without like, you know, things like bad things happening.
I
You
mean, I
know,
think everyone has some kind of survival instinct that leads them on a path, right? Sometimes that's like,
yeah.
you know, a childhood trauma, or sometimes it's like losing a job. There's some catalyst, you know, for a lot of things like that. Makes a lot of sense. 2008 was hard for a lot of people, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you when did so you graduated around 2008, would you say, or
2009, yeah. So
2009? Okay.
nobody was getting a job in my kind of like class of friends, but I was lucky. I was a pretty gifted programmer, and I applied to, I don't know, handful of startups, and Roblox was one of them. I had never played the game. I just it was just an application for me. It seemed like an interesting company, and yeah, they paid me $85,000 a year, and they gave me, I don't know, like 30 or 40,000 shares, of which I vested absolutely zero because I didn't even make it a year. Classic. But
Damn.
yeah, I was employee like, I can't remember. I was somewhere between like 8 and 15, somewhere in that range in Redwood City.
Yeah.
And even at that point, though, it was like a monstrous company that nobody knew about. Like they already had like millions of monthly active players.
Yeah.
The team was just so different from everything else in the valley. I mean, I've never seen a company like that, even to this day. That was like, I don't know, like just like everything they did just worked. Like everything they put out in the world is like they'd have customers for. It's just such a great market. Like this like perfect sandbox game for kids where even parents could buy into it, you know,
Yeah.
as something that was like healthy, and the kids liked it because it was addictive. Yeah, that was a cool experience.
I mean, you started at a rock star company out of the gate, but like being in Philadelphia, getting a job offer out in Silicon Valley right out of college, that's a little scary, right? Like, or you were just like bold and you just said, I'm just moving, nothing to lose.
I mean, the plan for me was to move anyway,
Okay.
so I kind of got lucky that getting a job was pretty easy. But I don't know, I was different. I've always been a little different. I definitely was ready to be on my own and do my own thing at that time.
How did your experiences at Roblox and Nest shape your approach to entrepreneurship?
I mean, I think those are two very distinct memories. Like for, Nest changed my life because the company was acquired when I was there, and I had a pretty sizable share allocation, so I got to experience money for the first time. Plus, the team at Nest was just like the best hardware team on earth, pretty much. So, top down, from the top all the way down, like every day I got to work with legends in battery tech and signal processing and all kinds of kind of areas. Roblox was just moved really fast for what they were in the early days of Roblox. And I remember seeing this at WhatsApp too in the early days, which if you remember when I was working on Origami, my first company, we were in downtown Mountain View, not too far from where you guys were, like maybe a
Yep.
mile down the road. I mean, it was like Mountain View was like the epicenter of everything happening in that time. But yeah, just we were just off Castro, and then the WhatsApp office was right off Castro as well. So we got to know some of those people when they were very, very tiny, but also massive, right? And was one of the biggest exits of all time in the valley. We've kind of forgotten, but yeah, like the philosophy of Roblox and WhatsApp was like ruthless approach to minimum viable products. Like just doesn't matter how it looks at all. If it's ugly, whatever it is, just like ship it, get it out the door, let people put their hands on it, make sure it does the one job very well. That's hard to unlearn because there's this other like feeling that you have to like always want to make everything perfect and like look nice and all that kind of stuff. But Roblox, I mean, you can see it even today. Like Roblox, for what they are, has one of the worst websites in like for their kind of scale. They just don't care because they know the heart of their business, which is this like making these awesome games for kids, and that's all they really care about. So, and Nest is like the exact opposite of that. Like nothing went out the door that didn't get Tony Fidel's stamp on every single pixel. So I guess both can work, but yeah, that's something that I noticed early on that I think is pretty interesting.
Did you adopt the move fast and break things mindset more, or are you more on the Tony Fadell side of design correction?
I've gone back and forth. Like I think with time, you can do a little bit of both. Like you with some experience, you kind of know the pitfalls before you get out there. But You know, it just depends on the product, honestly, because I do think if you're selling a healthcare product or whatever, right, like you just don't have that option. If you're selling financial infrastructure, a single mistake is big. So I think it's just more about knowing what the consequences are, how important what you're building is. What I do today, very much move fast and break things. We've put out some horrendous looking things, just to make sure you get it out the door in time, because what we're doing isn't like it isn't going to cost someone's life if it doesn't work. So, you know, I think it just depends.
I know I really liked Y Combinator's answer. I think it was Michael Seibel like was talking about how Sam Altman raised, all this money. And Sam Altman was saying, I would have maybe just raised all this money from the get-go of my first company. But he had to go through that journey of going through YC, becoming like a partner at YC, first company, not, you had to sell that. All that journey got him to that point to say that. And I feel like Tony Fadell was in a similar position where he went through a journey
For
at Apple,
sure.
and he had all these contacts that believed in him. It's hard to just be a new entrepreneur out of the gate and just raise $1 billion. Just right.
It's not practical. I
Yeah,
saw that and I thought it was, I understand what he's saying. And like,
yeah.
there's some, I don't know. It's just not usable advice for 99.999% of the people in the world. But yeah, I don't like whether you move fast or break things has nothing to do with capital raise. Like, in fact, I mean, most of the time, the more capital the company raises up front, the like more unlikely it is that they become successful in some ways. Like, at least in the hardware business, which I spent almost a decade in, everything in there got overfunded. Everything took way too long to ship. Everything was like needed to be perfect. And you can go like 3, 4, 5 years before you get a single customer on your products. And you have no idea if they're gonna like it by that time. I mean, it's just I don't know, like that obviously is like on one end of the spectrum and is obviously pretty bad. But I do feel like having a lot of capital can like lead you down some paths to that aren't so great if you're especially if you're inexperienced and you don't know what to do with it. There's like when companies have money they spend it, that's for sure, especially new entrepreneurs.
Could you tell us the story behind the inception of Solana Spaces and its mission to introduce people to the Solana ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. Solana Spaces was kind of like last thing I did in retail, and for many years I was building a brand called b8ta, which had these like physical retail stores all over the world. And we went through a very rough time during COVID, as everyone in our space pretty much did. But in that same time period, like during COVID, there was a huge boom in like certain speculative areas, including crypto. And so during COVID, I built a little bit of a relationship with folks at Solana Foundation. And initially, there was a conversation about having them show off their like payments products and other things in our b8ta stores, my other company. But that conversation kind of evolved over some time, and I got a call from them about 2 years ago saying that they had this idea to build retail stores. They wanted to know if I'd be interested in creating that and ideating that and bringing it to life. And yeah, b8ta was kind of like, it was very fortuitous because I was already thinking about what I was going to do next, because b8ta was at the end of its life. And so, yeah, I had nothing better to do. So I thought I'll give that a shot. Sounds interesting. Sounds weird. Yeah, for about 6 months, we designed these like crypto stores. And yeah, we launched 2 of them last year. And we walked right into like crypto's COVID, which was like this like horrible year of trouble for the ecosystem. But yeah, it was a an interesting time to be in the space, as I had just gone through like a 2 year period of disaster management. And then so I already had like the equipment inside to deal with like a lot of that stuff. But yeah, in February this year, we ended up taking one of the small things that we built there and spinning it out, raising capital, and I'm back on the entrepreneurial journey again.
Could you explain the concept of retail as a service and how it's like implemented in your venture?
The idea I had and when I was working at Nest was, let me explain like a little bit about retail industry. There's like 2 parts of retail. There's online retail, there's physical retail. Obviously Amazon eating everyone's lunch in terms of transactions. But what was interesting was if you looked at and you asked customers the question, how did you find out about this product? Like, how did you come to Amazon to buy this, right? It's not like people were independently searching Nest thermostat out of nowhere and then buying the thermostat on Amazon. They were being led there from somewhere. When we looked at that data set, physical retail was like 35 or 40% of the responses, and it was by far the number one source of leads to Amazon.com and to Nest.com. That to me was very interesting because my understanding of the retail model was that you paid the retailer. Sorry, the retailer took a margin when they sold a product, and if you walked out of the store without the product, the retailer didn't get paid, and that is how it works. Basically, stores had become a leaky bucket and had become an acquisition channel for Amazon. So the thought we had was, well, what if you could change the business model of retail and make it more of a service model where brands paid the retailer for the attention and for the space and for the resources that the retailer is providing to sell that product. And you walked away as part of that trade. You said, I don't need the sales. You can just pay me for the space and for the service. And I don't care if you want to sell someone on Amazon, you want to sell your product somewhere else. That's on you to kind of track that and capture that. So we went to market with this. It was really a breakthrough idea for the business. We had a store where every square inch of that store we sold to brands on a monthly basis. And it just led us down this very interesting path because in order to reconceive of a store as a marketing channel, we had to build all this other software and infrastructure to instrument the store with analytics and other tools to let brands kind of get the most out of that. Yeah, I mean, I think our thesis was very correct, and it continues to be true. Of course, people are every single year another 2 or 3% of transactions move to the internet. That's not going to slow down ever. So I think the question still is out there for stores, how do you make money in that universe, and what are you going to do with your leases? I think the solution we had was pretty good. Just ran up against a pretty rough climate there.
What do you envision as the future of retail and e-commerce as it evolves? Are there any inflection points in terms of transformation? I don't know, AI applied to things or?
I think we know a lot of things about the future. I think we know that people are buying less and less in the stores, although when they do visit stores, they're buying more. So the average basket size continues to increase, but the visitation is down. Traffic, depending on the year, I mean, it's falling, 5 to 10% every single year. And the customer demographics aren't changing. Young people don't go into stores. You're basically, the retail walk-in traffic is just tracking old people dying. That's basically the metric. And what happens when people like you and me who did go to stores stop going and we pass away, there's not going to be a lot there. So to me, very clearly, AI, will improve what is there in some aspects, maybe search. But to me, the storefront has to be focused on entertainment and storytelling and experience. And if it can't deliver that kind of thing, then people are not going to show up. And this was the big vision I pitched for many years. And because when we were doing this for electronics at the time, we saw an opportunity in grocery. We thought, hey, maybe grocery stores don't need to be organized by category, but they could be organized by recipe or what you're doing. There's other ways to kind of conceive of these transactional experiences and turn them into narrative experiences. And I think over 50 or 100 years, that vision will become true. I think in the short term, it's tough. You have a huge footprint of these locations. Transforming them is expensive, and retailers don't have the capital to do it. So it's kind of better for them just to sit on their innovator's dilemma and to keep bleeding out dividends until they disappear. Kind of the sad state of that side right now.
Blockbuster effect, where it takes a new entrant.
For sure.
Are you saying retail might go fully online? So you're saying 100 years from now? That's a bold statement, or would it be a little bit of retail?
I think so. I mean, I think it goes mostly online. This is where stuff like AI can be very helpful. Most of the things that people refer to as oh, I would never buy that on the internet are solvable things with computer vision and AI and augmented reality. The idea that I want to make sure something fits is a totally solvable problem that that, you know, through lots of techniques could be figured out. Like you don't have to buy things on the internet that don't fit you. That's just like a data problem. Like what is the size of the shirt and what is the size of your body and all that kind of stuff, right? So I don't know. It's just like it's kind of hard to like to think about, okay, what is like the thing that what's the moat that it really has against technology long term, especially as delivery is becoming instantaneous. I mean, I don't know. I just it's hard for me to see it.
I definitely feel like maybe I'm old because I actually went to the mall. I never go to the mall. I went to the mall for the first time and I was like touching and feeling the Nespressos and there was a Lucid car. It's almost like
Yeah.
you experience like things you would never be around. Like it's whatever. It's like coffee
Yeah.
machine. But I'm like, oh, these are all
Yeah.
varieties of like new design coffee machines that I haven't really looked at. And I was like, wow, I could use that. There's
Yeah.
this weird like affinity to sometimes when you're around something, you
Yeah.
kind of understand if it fits in your life or not. And I think that's where it's hard for me to say it's going to go
Oh
away
yeah.
totally. Like,
Well,
I
there's a
don't know what,
famous thing. Yeah.
yeah.
You're describing a really famous effect in retail, which is get the customer's hands to touch the product. A
Mm,
lot of top brands, they orient their, I mean, Nespresso does an amazing job of this. Like they build their experience for you to put your hands on it, and then you feel very attached to that object. And that is like a human thing. I'm not saying that they're like that doesn't work because it obviously does. I'm just wondering what the argument is for you to go in the first place.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
both Nespresso and Lucid are examples of brands that have a showroom model primarily. And like Nespresso is one of the few like expansive brands in retail because people they also have a great business model because they have it's not just selling you one time thing, right? They have
Right.
replenishment. So I'm pretty bearish long term. It's hard not to be, but there's like little opportunities like Nespresso inside of there that can find some traction.
I guess another question for you. So let's backtrack a little bit. You know, you were working at Origami Labs. You were like a founder at that company in Mountain View, and then like you get acquired by Nest. It's like you went from crazy startup to like hardware. I remember like that leap happening for you. You were very, it was a nimble team. I just remember the Origami team being very nimble and like trying to make things work. And like then immediately, like you're in a different environment at Nest. Probably some of the best people in the world. Like Tony Fidel is like world renowned as a good entrepreneur. I'm like, he seemed very involved with his team. I'm sure it's
For
good and it's
sure.
bad all in one, but like the company's successful because of that like pressure, But first of all, most companies just die. They don't even get acquired. Like going through that process, kudos to you, right? Correct, it was acquired. Can I talk about that? Or is that
Mhm.
off the record or
It was basically an acquihire because we weren't doing any kind of hardware thing. But at that time, mobile engineering teams were super highly valued because we were just making this like everyone was building apps, native apps at the time, and we had
yeah.
one of the best mobile teams in the valley. Yeah, we had a couple offers actually just like that.
Like how did and you were there for a bit of time, like how did you make that transition? Like was that a hard experience? Like why would you when you've been an entrepreneur so long, like why do people fail not to get acquired? You did it. That was a
Um,
success and then you were at a rock star company.
I don't know. I feel like I mean, there's so many like conditions inside of there. I mean, we were a team of like a whole bunch of engineers who were pretty good, and we had a really good introduction in from David Lieb on our board, who founded Bump. I'm sure you know David
Yeah, yeah,
from
yeah.
YC. Yeah, I don't know. The transition was for my team was very easy. For me, it was a little harder because honestly, we came in and like every single one of our team members had an immediate impact on Nest. Like I think we were just kind of like used to working at a much faster speed, even for them, and they were, pretty sizable, pretty like, methodical. I would say the hardest thing was kind of like learning the culture, and Nest was very bureaucratic. I would say like very structured. Like 90% of the team was ex Apple, so like they all picked up that. I don't know if you know like people that work at Apple. I'm sure you do. Like it's definitely like a much more structured company than
Yeah,
than some of the other
yeah.
tech giants. It was kind of like that, and I was very like much more of a hacker type, like just trying to get stuff done. I didn't really care if I was stepping on someone's toes or area. I would go and jump into someone else's code base and like commit a fix and then come back and not talk to them about it. So I definitely like got pulled into some HR meetings early on, but I know that the founders and kind of like leadership appreciated that too, because they, you know, sometimes you just need to get something done and get it out there. And I think myself and my team kind of had that energy. When I was building b8ta too, we sought out small teams from YC or other places that, you know, their company didn't work, and we would make them an offer, come on board. And they were always like the go-getters on our team. They helped us kind of break up the energy a little bit and like bring something different, bring ideas to the table, all that kind of stuff. It was important for me because I think just experiencing the feeling of how that kind of company gets built, the intention. I wrote about this long ago when I left. Like, never felt like there was any chance the company wasn't going to succeed, and Tony created that aura around everything. I think it was like, as a younger person, it was easy for me to see that as like, oh, he's someone different and he's older and he's got this like skill set that I you know, that was learned under Steve Jobs, and, you know, kind of idolized that. As I kind of like thought about it more over time and looked back on it, like, he's just a good entrepreneur, and he figured out how to build that aura, and he figured out how to create that kind of energy around him, and that it's not like something innate, it's something anyone can kind of learn how to do. So yeah, it was like I was just super inspired by him in general. And he was difficult. Like, for a lot of people, he's very difficult, but we have a very good relationship. And I think I don't know, I really valued working for him and his team.
And then were you there during the transition to Google?
Yeah, I was only there for like 4 or 5 months before it was acquired. So it was,
Wow.
yeah, it was like, and then once it was acquired, we continued to remain independent of Google for about a year. So even though we kind of transitioned under Google and we had some Google integration, we were still the Nest team, and like the Google Nest team at that time. So that was like, okay, well, we have free breakfast and lunch now, which we didn't have pre-Google, and all the Google benefits, but we had our own office and their own, you know, kind of equipment and all that kind of jazz.
I mean, Google's massive, so it's probably like jaunting to just get acquired, and then it's jaunting to like work for Google. It's probably a lot of change happening for the company.
It was, yeah, it was like a huge clash of cultures. Like, the Google style and the Apple style are just two different countries, you know. Tony kind of shielded the entity from a lot of that, but like, we started to see, like, especially the engineering side, engineering managers would parachute in from Google, bringing their, you know, OKR frameworks and all these other things that we were like just totally didn't understand. And like, Google has also like really rigorous just like HR infrastructure for tracking performance and doing all these kind of things. And honestly, I wanted nothing to do with it, which is why I didn't stay that long. It was like, it was interesting to see. I was like, I'm just not, this is not for me. It's an awesome company. I just can't do it.
So the HR sides from like the Google side and like the OKRs from the Google side, like, I guess the Apple culture was structured different, very structured, but like, what's the difference between the
Yeah.
Apple? I mean, I know Google is kind of like just build fast, but like if it fails, you just cut it. I mean, it's from an outsider, it's like Google Glass. Like, they built this thing,
Yeah.
they launch it, they pour money into it, and then they're like, forget it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if Apple works that way.
It's like left brain, right brain. You know, I mean, I think like Google is like, you know, incredibly data driven at every level. And like, Apple culture is much more about like breakthrough ideas that come from the top. And then everyone kind of hustles together to make that happen. And it's like led by design and product. Like, the most power and marketing, like the Nest organizational structure that came from Apple is that the product marketing team those are the people that control what gets made, and it all starts from the message. Like, how are you going to talk about this product? Okay, you understand how you're going to talk about it. Now let's go and figure out what the product is, and let's build it. And Google's like exactly the opposite of that. It's like, let's tinker and tinker and tinker. Let's keep looking at it. Let's keep looking at the data. Let's pull this stuff. Like, we just didn't have that kind of discipline at Nest, and if you tried to bring that discipline, it wasn't like culturally accepted. So
Right.
I don't think that was, didn't at the time. It was very public. There was a big public spat between Tony and the other like Google execs, and then Tony eventually left, like not super long after I did.
What's been your most rewarding aspect of your startup and entrepreneurship experience so far?
Rewarding or like fondest, because rewarding is a strong word.
Like maybe the most fun and meaningful, let's say, or fulfilling.
Definitely building beta all the way up to COVID. Like we ended up raising a like $65 million C in 2019 summer. Like the life that I had imagined as a kid was like upon me, and I felt that very strongly. Like we were building something that was working. Team was growing. We're 250 people. I felt like I had the ability to will things into existence, whatever it was, you know. And I think I remember, I think, I don't know if this is Paul Graham or someone, maybe it was someone, Sam Altman was talking about like that, like the entrepreneurship gene is like agency. And I think like, I felt like I had gotten to that point where I understood what that meant. And it meant like being able to run through walls to get anything that you needed done. And I really got to express that. Like we were just launching multiple verticals. We acquired Toys R Us out of bankruptcy. We built JVs in Japan. I was about to sign a deal in India. We did a deal in Dubai. We were in Europe. I was like traveling 150, 200,000 miles a year. Unfortunately, like that's or not unfortunately. I mean, I'm very fortunate I got to see what it looked like for a brief moment at that kind of like stage. And yeah, it was just good times. Like, there's nothing like that, kind of like product market fit at that level. I need to get back there. That's my current goal.
I mean, I feel like a lot of people burn out, and I noticed you didn't. Like, you have a fire in you. Like,
Oh, I burned out big time.
okay,
That's definitely not true. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, you saw my post that I put out there. Like COVID was just a shatterer of my ego and everything else. Like I mean, we were just so exposed to it. Like we were growing faster than anyone else in our industry. And we had just we literally a quarter prior, we doubled our store count globally. We were investing all over the place. This like sprint into a wall where like you wake up and within 2 weeks, I don't have a single customer in my store. And every single one of my brands is calling me saying they don't want to pay me anymore, even though they love us. They can't justify not, like paying for something that they're not getting, which I understood. Like that experience burned me out tremendously. Like it was like the last year of company's life. I mean, even when I'm burned out, I'm probably executing at like top 1%, but as an entrepreneur, but we tried a lot of things last year, but I was really just dragging my legs with me at that time, to be very honest with you.
I think there was a lot of companies. I spoke to one entrepreneur. This is someone from YC. They mentioned they had $100 million of revenue, and it went to zero in like no time, and they were basically like done. The devastation that happened from COVID, it was rough on a lot of companies. Like, and that person was burned out. They're like, I don't want to do that again. And this is someone who's a hugely successful entrepreneur. I'm like, man, they're traumatized by like what happened. And they're like, I'll be a VC.
I'm surprised.
Yeah. What were your strategies to recover from burnout and get back to it? Because you just started DRiP, right?
I did, yeah, like a company right after. It was like a different experience because it was backed by a massive crypto foundation, and so there's a little bit less like financial pressure in certain places. I don't know. I mean, I think I think I think I'm still like recovering in some ways. Like I'm still trying to find that same voice, and my skill set for building companies is very strong. I remember Samir Calls, who's a board member, he's a VC at Coastal Ventures, GP there, and he said something to me very early on building. They backed b8ta from like day one. I remember bringing some decision to him that was like financial related, and he's like, he was like, don't be penny wise, pound foolish. I never forgot that, because the idea that like it's okay to spend money in exchange for growth that time was like, it's just something I needed to hear. But like you kind of like stash these ideas away, and then if you go through a period like we did with COVID, you become very conservative. And so I keep trying to channel this other side of being an entrepreneur, because when something's working, you really do want to lean into it and go with your instincts. You don't want to be held back and be so conservative, right? If there's a big market to kind of chase. So I don't know. I think strategy wise, like it's just been like continuing to build. I've been tweeting a lot. I've been like kind of sharing more openly with people, trying to be healthy, lifting, taking care of my kids. I don't know. there's a whole bunch of stuff. I probably never like, forget about it, but at least until DRiP is kind of like at the next stage, maybe things will change for me. We'll see.
I guess I mean, one thing I remember that you did was you wrote a really famous, I'm trying to remember the blog post, but it was on a plane. It kind of like went viral. Do you remember this? This is probably like 7 years ago. And I forget exactly what it was about, but I just remember thinking like you're optimizing every piece of your time. And you posted this and I was like, oh man, he's just really optimized
I
your
did. I like to
time.
write on planes, so that's not surprising to hear. But I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, writing has been something I've been doing my whole life. So yeah, even during origami, I started writing a lot about what I was thinking at the time. When I read that stuff today, I appreciate that version of the world that I saw then. You do lose your innocence a lot, and that's okay, But I'm kind of like squarely convinced, and you guys won't want to hear this, but that like once your brain is fully developed, it's a million times harder to build a big company because you just start over optimizing everything, trying to like catch yourself before something doesn't work. And like the biggest companies in the world, they're all started by like 20, like young 20 somethings, right? Because I think at that time you just you have no inhibitions about what can be built. So I'm sorry, Daniel, like you and me are probably like capped at low tens of billions of value, but that's okay.
I just keep going. I mean, honestly, it's more the game of entrepreneurship. It creates
Yeah,
like meaning for me. I
yeah,
think it's
I feel that.
like it creates culture. I don't know. I like the culture of like building a community of like people working towards a mission, and it like creates meaning for my life. So when I don't do that, I feel like lost a little bit. It's kind of
Oh
crazy. Like,
yeah.
what do you do? I guess flipping it just because we only have a few minutes left. Interlace Ventures, like you're an investor now, and you've been an investor for several years.
Mhm.
What do you look for investments? Like when do you feel confident? And I was talking to an entrepreneur yesterday, and he's like, I have a meeting and no one responds. And I'm like, there are many thoughts going through my head on like why they're not going to invest in
The
this company.
investor.
Yeah, the investor is not investing in
Yeah,
the entrepreneur's company. I'm like, what do you look for? Like, what is your thought process like for making
yeah.
investments and then actually, because pulling the trigger is the hardest part, and then like finding those entrepreneurs, like, is it an arduous job? Is it an easy job? Like,
I thought maybe that was a potential path for me post beta, and so one of our seed investors had asked if I wanted to come and work with them a bit and kind of learn that side of the world. I don't spend a ton of time there, like a couple hours a week because I'm focused on building my company. But I was getting a ton of deal flow, and he was building. He's like does a lot of retail and tech stuff and kind of my area. I think what is like what's very hard for founders to see is that what they're building is not necessarily the most important thing to everybody else, and especially when investors like there might be 20 30 other things that are in their inbox that day, and it's your job as a founder to stand out somehow in that field, and the truth is like most people don't. And I think there's like the hard part of the job is, my observation has been that usually like there are really great companies that are pretty obvious from the get-go, and those are just competitive to get into. So like you're trying to figure out how you can add value to them very quickly and express how helpful you can be in different ways. Like picking is not necessarily, I guess, the challenging part. There's just like 99% of the companies are just not ready for venture pretty clearly. And then yeah, when you do find one, like you just need to lean in really hard and as an investor and get time with them and just make sure that you have visibility in their kind of process. I'm very new to that side. It's been a couple of years, but like I wouldn't say I'm a good investor. It's like I'm much more helpful once they're actually, when they have questions about what to do next or looking for intros and stuff like that. That's kind of more my where I succeed.
got it. So you're more entrepreneur still than investor. Do you see yourself going down that path like long term, or do you envision yourself like being an entrepreneur like
Not anymore. I mean, with all due respect to my partners over there, like I'm just too hands-on, and like it's not what founders need most of the time. They when they call for advice, they're not asking you to solve their problems or reinvent their business. They're just looking for someone to talk to. Like, and I'm not good at that. I'm like, oh, well, have you tried this? Have you tried this? Well, I think this idea is bad. Why don't you do that? Like, that's just not like that's not the role that unless you're on the board, it's just not your role. So um I it's too slow for me. I need to build something, and honestly I'm just that's my gift to the world. I'm not my gift is not like writing a check to somebody.
Looking ahead, what new projects or ideas are you most excited to explore or develop? I know you recently started DRiP. Maybe you could talk about that, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. There are a lot of things to not like about crypto. I always want to give that disclaimer because if you're not from the space, sometimes it does have like a certain image. The foundational thing about distributed crypto systems is the idea that information is public, and we have this idea called composability, where when you have a piece of data or an image or an asset, that thing is not necessarily in a database, it's exposed to the public, and many people can kind of build around that on top of that, and so on. We kind of like, I won't go through the whole stories in all time, but we had this thought that, you know, there was something to be built kind of in the creator economy space. And the creator economy has been a huge, massive failure for the most part for actual creators. If you look at the economics of creating YouTube videos, TikTok videos, posting on Instagram, it doesn't exist. I mean, unless you're in the very, 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 very top percentile, that long tail is not being monetized. It's also very hard to grow out of the long tail into the short tail these days. And the proposed fix from Silicon Valley so far has been like Patreon, or like these kind of like ways for creators to take their audience out of a platform somewhere else and then ask them to pay money for that. And that's just a tough value prop because like why would I pay for something that I'm getting for free somewhere else? Like most people kind of have that opinion, that like thought, and it's very rational. So I think what we think crypto kind of provides creators here is a way to not ask your fans to buy access from you for digital goods, but instead to actually buy digital goods that have retained value instead. And so like what DRiP kind of does is we work with independent creators who are artists, musicians, other people who are normally kind of stuck in the long tail. Maybe they have 100,000 followers on Instagram or 300K on TikTok. We build them this one place to kind of distribute both their primary content and their exclusive content, and it's all on chain. And so when creators kind of create with us, they're in the process kind of giving back to their audience. They're giving their fans something that they can keep and they can trade and they can sell even in the future. And what this does is that galvanizes fan bases very quickly around creators. So our average creator launches on day one with like 10 to 20,000 fans out of the gate. And that's something that like no other platform in the world kind of provides. We also start paying you right away. You start to make $10, $50, $100 just from the get-go. So yeah, basically DRiP is Patreon, the creator economy platform, kind of with the reinvented tech stack and a big focus on supporting independent creation.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, I'm actually looking at the webpage now. It's kind of cool to see all like the artwork that's on there and the creators doing, the stuff that's being put on there. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on. I know, Greg, do you have any more questions?
Just grateful for you sharing your story with us, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, Vibhu, this was awesome just to catch up and just see where you're at. And you're one of the smartest people I know. So I feel like whatever you work on, whatever you work on, I feel like there's a high chance of success. So I'm really excited, like to see DRiP House, like DRiP, just become successful. It's a really good idea. I'm like, it seems really cool, honestly. Just you talking through it.
And are you in Austin now, Texas?
I live in Austin now. Yeah, I just moved here a couple months ago.
You were right here in Palo Alto. What led you to move?
Cost of living. We have 2 kids mostly, and wanting a little bit of peace. Honestly, moving here has been part of my like getting some space, having a place I can just walk down the street without any noise. has been very, very healthy for us and our family.
It's nice.
I love Palo Alto though. I miss it. Yeah.
It's so much hustle and bustle here. I feel like it's always on. I mean, that's good in
Yes.
some senses, but also really bad in other senses. Like it's not healthy to be working 24/7 and like, I don't know, it's not, sometimes it's just not good, but getting away from that, it's healthy to see the other parts of the world.
Sure.
But awesome.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much, Vibhu. Good luck on your new startup. Thank you again.
Very
for
much
catching up.
appreciate the invite. Yeah, and congratulations to you, Greg. Class of 2020.
Yeah. I just put that up when the pandemic started and I like it. So
All right, guys. Take care.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye, guys.